What is up, everybody? I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Welcome back to the channel for another tier list video, and with us only being a little over a month away from the trade deadline, I thought it would be fun to rank every NHL team on what I think their status is heading into trade season. The 5 tiers we're going to be ranking teams in are buyers, conservative sellers, sellers, and blow it up. Those tiers, I believe, are pretty self-explanatory. As always, I want to know your guys' thoughts, so if you disagree with any of my choices, be sure to let me know what you would change down below in the comments. Also, if you want to see more tier list videos in the future, then be sure to drop a like on this. That's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, if you want NHL content just like this all year long. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers in 2023, so every subscription counts. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and get started. This is in alphabetical order. So the first team up is the Anaheim Ducks, and I'm just going to put them in sellers. Don't really think they need to blow it up because they don't really have much to blow up. Not a ton of expiring deals on the Ducks. The big one, obviously, that a lot of people are going to be focusing on is John Klingberg, who they signed in the offseason. And even when that signing was made, we all kind of expected that this would happen. He'd be a guy they look to shop at the deadline. Kevin Shattenkirk is another guy that I think you should keep an eye on. Right shot, puck moving defenseman. Obviously, both Klingberg and Shattenkirk haven't performed the greatest this season, so I'm not quite sure what a return for them could look like. It probably won't be much, but just based off of their reputations alone, you should be able to fetch something. Next up, we have the Arizona Coyotes. I'll put them in the same tier as the Anaheim Ducks. They've kind of already passed the point of blowing it up. Now, they do have one of the biggest trade pieces available in Jacob Chychrun, who since returning from injury has been fantastic for Arizona. That's obviously a player who's expected to fetch a massive haul in return, and I think that's why we haven't seen him moved yet. Arizona is being really patient with him. Shane Gostisbehere is another guy I could see the Coyotes moving. He's in the final year of his contract. If made available, I definitely think there would be some interest there, and I don't know why Arizona wouldn't make him available. Karel Vejmelka is a little bit of a wild card. It was reported a couple of weeks ago that Arizona would make him available for the right price, but big goaltender trades, that's not usually something we see happen mid-season. Teams usually like to shore up their goaltending position in the off-season, and Vejmelka has 3 years left on his deal, so I'm not sure how likely it is that he gets dealt, but someone to keep an eye on for sure. Next up, we have the Boston Bruins. I'm going to put them in the conservative buyers tier. They are currently on a 3-game losing streak for the first time all season, but I mean, we know how good this team is. We know the kind of season that they're having. Honestly, I don't know how smart it would be for Boston to go out and make a massive splash at the deadline to really shake up the roster, because I don't really think you want to mess with things all that much. This is a roster that is very clearly good enough to contend for a Stanley Cup. This is a group that's been together for a very long time, so again, I don't know if you want to do anything to really shake that up, but obviously, if you have the opportunity to make your team better, then you go out and do that. I just think maybe they'd be better off just making some minor moves. The Buffalo Sabres are up next. Honestly, kind of a tough one. I wish I made a tier that just said stand pat, but for now, I'm going to put Buffalo as conservative sellers. Obviously, this is a team that's been quite a story this year. They're in the thick of the wildcard hunt currently. However, I don't think it would be smart for them to go out and say trade their first round pick for a rental to try to really make a push for one of those wildcard spots. When it comes to the Sabres, honestly, I feel like you could put them in conservative buyers or conservative sellers. Maybe they go out and make some minor moves to get some reinforcements, or I could see maybe a team offering them a mid-round pick for Zemgus Girgensons in the final year of his deal. Maybe that's something they consider. I feel like the Sabres are a team that's not going to be all that active around and leading up to the trade deadline. I think one of the best things they could do is just ride it out with this group and stay patient, because I think they've proven that they have a really bright future. The Calgary Flames are up next. Definitely going to put them as conservative buyers in a tier with the Boston Bruins. The Flames are currently on the outside looking in terms of the playoff race, and if that's the case a month from now, then definitely don't want to go out and trade your first round pick or anything, especially in a draft where Connor Bedard's going to be available first overall. Everybody knows that the Calgary Flames could use a top 6 winger. If you can do that without mortgaging too much of your future or taking that big of a risk, I think you obviously do it. But other than that, I really don't feel like the Calgary Flames have proven to their front office this year that they're worthy of, the front office going out and making a big win now move and really going all in. The Carolina Hurricanes are up next. Definitely going to put them up here in the buyers tier. I'm all in on this year's version of the Hurricanes. I think they are legit. They were my President's Trophy pick coming into this season. They currently have the second best record in the league behind the Bruins. And although the Max Pacioretty situation really sucks, it does give them some money to work with leading up to the deadline. And I think this is a team in a prime position to really go all in and go for it. They have pretty much all their draft picks. I think a legit number 2 option at center would really put the Hurricanes over the top. Could you just imagine this team with Bo Bo Horvat. The Chicago Blackhawks, they're going in the blow it up tier. Obviously, they kind of started their blow up in the offseason, getting rid of DeBrincat, Kirby Dach, not qualifying Strome and Kubalik. I think it's likely we see them finish the job leading up to this year's trade deadline. Obviously, there's going to be so much focus on Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, but they do have a lot of other tradable assets as well, guys like Athanasiou and Domi. Also, defenseman Jake McCabe, who's in the final year of his contract. It's already been reported that the Maple Leafs have a ton of interest in McCabe, so this is definitely going to be a fun team to watch leading up to the deadline because I could see them making a handful of moves. The next team we have is the Avalanche. I'm putting them as buyers. I know there was a lot of people worried about the Avalanche like a couple of weeks ago, but now they've gotten themselves into the playoffs, thrown a nice roll as of late, and that's with, you know, so many important players missing a ton of games for them this season. Their captain hasn't even played a game yet. They are the defending Stanley Cup champions, making moves at last year's deadline. Worked out pretty well for them. Just look at Arturi Lehkonen and how important of a player he's became for this team. I think if you can improve this roster, you do it any way you possibly can, and I think Joe Sakic will. Next up, we have the Blue Jackets. Hard not to put them in the sellers tier after what we've seen from them this season. Obviously, they've had a ton of bad injury luck as well. I don't think they should blow it up. I don't think that would be a good signal to Johnny Gaudreau in his first season of that massive deal he signed with them. I feel like Columbus is a team that wants to be and expects to be competitive within the next couple of seasons, so that's why I just can't see them going out and gutting their roster, but moving guys on expiring deals like Vladislav Gavrikov and Gustav Nyquist. If he's healthy around the deadline, then that's something I could definitely see happening. The Dallas Stars, 100% have to put them up here in the buyers tier with Carolina and Colorado. They are currently the #1 team in the Western Conference at 28, 13, and 10. We saw them push Calgary to 7 games in the first round of last year's playoffs. I think this team is legit. They have a star goaltender in Jake Ottinger. They have a superstar forward in Jason Robertson, and you can honestly make the case that Roope Hintz should be in that category as well. They have the stud defenseman in Heiskanen, with a guy like Joe Pavelski at 38 years old, still playing as well as he is, and Jamie Benn having kind of a career resurgence this season. I think you go for it if you're the Dallas Stars. You do whatever you can to make this roster the best it can be. Now, they already traded their first round pick when they acquired Nils Lundqvist, but they definitely still have some assets that are tradable. Denis Gurianov, they have their second round pick this year and the next 2 drafts. Next up, we have the Red Wings, and I'm going to put them in the sellers tier. Was thinking about conservative sellers, but I honestly think you should probably clean house and get as many future assets as you possibly can for the guys on your roster who are expiring and who are likely not going to return. Guys like Oli Mata, Oscar Sundqvist, Adam Ernie, Hugh Suter, Tyler Bertuzzi is another name. I'm really interested to see what happens with him. As much as it pains me to say it, Dylan Larkin has still not signed an extension. Jake Wallman too. Like, this is a team that could really go any way at the deadline, and as a Red Wings fan, I'm kind of excited, but I'm also a little bit nervous. The Edmonton Oilers, easy one for me. They have to be buyers as long as you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl for that matter playing at this kind of elite level. You have to go for it every single year. It wasn't looking good for the Oilers after the first few months, but they've really gotten things together over their last 10. They're 7-1-2. You do what you got to do to put the best possible team around Connor McDavid, whether that means digging into your prospect pool and trading away some of your top guys in the pipeline, or trading away your first round pick or multiple draft picks, whatever it is. The Florida Panthers, man, what do you do in this situation? Last year's President's Trophy winners, and they have a worse points percentage than the Red Wings currently do. Time is running out for the Panthers. They have to go on a run, and they have to do it soon. Any other year, this would be a team I'm saying conservative sellers, most likely, or just straight up sellers, but they don't have their first round pick, which could wind up being Connor Bedard. So you are buyers. You have no choice. You absolutely have to go out and try to improve this roster, try to salvage the season and squeak into a wildcard spot, because if you miss the playoffs and you don't have your first round pick in a draft like this year's, it could be a disaster. The Los Angeles Kings, I'm going to put them as conservative buyers, having a strong season, currently hold the 3rd spot in the Pacific Division. We saw them take the Edmonton Oilers to 7 games in the first round last year. We know this is a team that's good enough to compete right now, and they have a bright future. I think if you're the Kings, you don't get ahead of yourself, trust the process. I don't think it would be all that smart to go out and mortgage a lot of that bright future to get pieces to help win now. I do think they need a goalie. It's no secret there. Phoenix Copley has taken over as their starter, which is pretty crazy. And he is 15-3. He's been good enough for them to win games, but his individual stats aren't amazing. And ideally, is Phoenix Copley a guy you want to roll out there as your starter in a 7-game series? I don't really think so. So maybe this is a team that could be interested in a guy like Kirill Vizmelka, who we talked about earlier. The Minnesota Wild. This is a team in a really interesting position. They currently hold the 3rd spot in the Central Division. all in all, especially considering their really rough first couple weeks of the season they had, they're in a decent position. Honestly, I feel like Minnesota could do a little bit of both, maybe a little bit of selling and a little bit of buying. I'm really interested to see what happens with Matthew Dumba. He's a UFA at season's end. He's been a healthy scratch a couple of times, so that's somebody I think we should keep an eye on. Maybe they move him, but then I could also see them trying to improve the roster a little bit. Like I said, they are in a playoff spot, and the buyout penalties for Parise and Suter only get worse next season, so it's going to be even harder to build a contending team under the cap. I think with the Minnesota Wild, I'm going to land in conservative buyers, but like I said, I feel like we could probably see them do a little bit of both buying and selling. The Montreal Canadiens are up next, and I'm going to put them in the sellers tier. Obviously, they're not going to be going out and buying or anything like that. I feel like you could make the case they should be down here and blow it up. Maybe they decide to move guys like Christian Dvorak and David Savard. All in all, this is a team I expect to have a relatively quiet deadline. Maybe we see them move a guy like Joel Edmondson, but other than that, I mean, so many guys are injured, right? Like Sean Monahan, obviously with his injury, how likely is it he gets dealt? It's a shame too, because before Monahan got hurt, with the season he was having, he probably could have got the Montreal Canadiens a pretty decent return. The Nashville Predators are up next. This may be a bit of a controversial take, but I'm putting them in the blow it up tier. How long are you just going to ride it out with this core that is just not good enough to be legit contenders? Yeah, they're good enough to compete for a wildcard spot. Yeah, they got into the playoffs last year, but they got absolutely rinsed in the first round against Colorado, and it sucks because Saros is on an absolute tear right now, and he's one of the best goaltenders in the league, but even with him playing at that level, the Nashville Predators are not in a playoff spot. I think it's time to start thinking about the future before it's too late, moving guys like Granlund and Ekholm for starters, who are probably two of their more tradable assets. It's not obviously easy to trade guys on massive contracts, and they have a lot of those. The New Jersey Devils, definitely going to put them in the buyers tier. It's looking like they're just entering their contending window, having an unbelievable season. Jack Hughes has emerged as one of the absolute best players in the league. He's a Hart candidate this year. I think if you have an opportunity to go and make a big splash, you do that, and the one I think I'm and everyone else are thinking about is Timo Meier, who I just think would be a beautiful fit on the Devils. They have the kind of assets as to where they could pull a trade like that off. He fits their timeline. I just think it's a match made in heaven. The New York Islanders, man, this is a tough one. I'm going to say conservative buyers. They're currently on the outside looking in the playoff race. They've had a rough past month and a half. This core has obviously shown that they can be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs, but this year there's obviously no guarantee that they're even going to get there. I feel like this is a team that's in need of a really big shakeup. Honestly, I know I just mentioned Timo Meier for the Devils, but I think the Islanders should be all over that as well and doing everything they can to get a guy like him who would not only just help them this season, but be a long-term option obviously as well. You have a guy in Ilya Sorokin who's been lights out, one of the best goalies in the league, one of the most valuable players in the league, and yet you're still not in the playoff spots. So it's a rough situation, honestly a similar situation to the Predators. However, obviously, given where I've ranked these teams in this tier list, I have a lot more faith in the Islanders' ability to turn it around and become contenders than the Predators. The New York Rangers, buyers for sure. Man, the top three in that Metro division, Carolina, New Jersey, New York, that's a damn good division. I had the Rangers as one of my Stanley Cup contenders heading into the season. I still feel the same way about them. I think if you can go and make a big splash, you do that, whether that means, moving your first round pick or whether that means going out and maybe looking to move a guy like Alexis Lafreniere, who obviously just hasn't developed up until this point how everyone expected him to. Same goes for Capo Caco. I feel like the Rangers could really be put over the top by a legit top 6 scoring winger. I'll throw Timo Meier's name out there again. I think he's going to be a really sought after player. The Ottawa Senators, I'm going to say conservative sellers. They don't really have a ton of players that I expect to be moved. I mean, they'll probably trade Zaitsev, that is if they can find a suitor for him, which, I mean, who knows? Other than that, maybe guys like Austin Watson and Tyler Mott, who are in the final year of their deals, could see some teams willing to give them a mid-round pick for those guys, but other than that, I feel like they're probably not going to do all that much. The Philadelphia Flyers, I definitely feel like they need to blow it up. They're kind of just treading water right now. They're not as bad as everyone expected them to be. They're currently at 500. John Tortorella is definitely doing a good job of getting the most he can out of this group, but I feel like soon the Flyers really have to separate themselves from the teams that are like fringe wildcard teams. I think they got to get down there to the basement of the league, give themselves the best opportunity at Connor Bedard, move guys like Provorov, JVR, maybe even Travis Konechny. I know he's playing amazing this season, but that's something they could definitely cash in on. He's 25 years old. It could be another Timo Meier situation where, yeah, he's obviously a good young player, but Philly should really just be just entering their rebuild now, similar to the Sharks. The Pittsburgh Penguins, conservative buyers, I think. They've had an up and down season, currently in a playoff spot, 1 point ahead of the Buffalo Sabres, who have the same amount of games played. It's going to be a really interesting race between those two teams. When you still have Crosby and Malkin playing as good as they are, I don't think the Penguins would ever consider blowing it up, but I also don't think it would be smart for them to go out and mortgage more of their future to help this team win now, because they already don't have many future assets. One of the worst prospect pools in the league, bar none. Do not think it would be a good idea to go and trade, say, your first round pick from this year's draft, for example. I think you're going to want to hold on to that. Have to put them in the blow it up tier. Obviously, Timo Meier has been mentioned a ton throughout this video. He's one of the most interesting players to watch leading up to the deadline, a guy I fully expect to get traded and likely for a pretty big haul. Obviously, Erik Karlsson, there's still that whole situation, even though I feel like a Karlsson trade would be much more likely in the offseason just because of his massive contract. We all know the direction the Sharks are heading. It's time to fully embrace this rebuild. Another guy that I think could benefit a lot of contending teams is Nick Bonino, who's in the final year of his deal. The Seattle Kraken are up next, one of the biggest stories of the season, currently first place in the Pacific. Martin Jones with 23 wins, although he only has an .895 save percentage. Just a crazy season they're having, and honestly I feel like this is a team that should probably stand pat, so again, I'm wishing I had that in here, so I'll just throw them in the conservative buyers tier. I don't think you should get too ahead of yourselves and go out and, trade your best prospects and all your draft picks and kind of do what Vegas did in their first few seasons. There was some speculation of could they potentially trade Shane Wright for Bo Horvat, which I just think is crazy. I think you should probably just stick it out with this group this season. Obviously, make some minor moves if you can improve your team without taking too big of a risk. The St. Louis Blues, gonna have to put them in the sellers tier. I don't think they should blow it up. I feel like this is a team that's not in need of a full-fledged rebuild, but more so a retooling. They have young stars like Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, Buchnevich, who's in his prime, but it's just not happening this season. I can't see them being in a much better position than they're in right now, a month from now, so I think guys like Ryan O'Reilly should be on the chopping block, and they should look to cash in on him. Vladimir Tarasenko as well. Obviously not the year Blues fans were expecting, but hey, if you're going to be bad for one season and then try to turn things around again heading into next year, a year in which Connor Bedard is available to be drafted, not a bad year to be bad. Next up, we have the Lightning, whose logo I didn't even know if it was there or not, but it is, just a white one, and I'm going to put them in the buyers tier. I mean, they're active every year at the trade deadline. They've been to the last 3 Stanley Cup finals. As long as you have the core of Vasilevsky, Hedman, Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos playing as well as they are right now, you got to go for it, right? The Maple Leafs, definitely have to put them up there in the buyers category. Say what you want about their playoff failures and how it's kind of a running joke at this point where everyone's like, okay, this is the best the roster has ever looked, in the Matthews and Marner era, but honestly, this year is the best the team has ever looked, defensively especially. If you're Kyle Dubas and you don't get out of the first round again this year, you're likely gone anyway, so you got to do whatever you can to ensure that first round playoff failure doesn't happen again. The Vancouver Canucks, I mean, we know they're not going to blow it up because Jim Rutherford already said so I'm not going to put them in the blow it up category, although I think they should, so I'm just going to put them in sellers. Bo Horvat, one of the biggest names everyone's focusing on leading up to the deadline. I feel like it's almost like a 95% chance Horvat is going to get dealt. They already extended Kuzmenko, which, I mean, I think it's a fine contract, but honestly, I feel like they probably should have just cashed in on his value. Aside from Bo Horvat, could they potentially move a guy like Connor Garland? Is Brock Besser still potentially being moved? Who knows, but definitely one of the more interesting teams leading up to the trade deadline. The Vegas Golden Knights, probably conservative buyers. I mean, they don't really have the space or the assets to go and make a huge splash. They're having a nice bounce back season. I think this team is good enough, if everyone's clicking, to go on a run in the West, so I don't expect them to do much, mostly because they can't really, unless they go out and trade a guy like Martinez or Smith or Marchessault to free up some cap space, which, I mean, hey, based on what they've done in years past, wouldn't put it past them. Before we move on to the Washington Capitals, I'm putting the New York Islanders down here, honestly, as conservative sellers. Just more than I think about it, like in a year where you could draft Connor Bedard, if you have your first round pick and it's not looking like you're going to make the playoffs, just sell. So that's kind of what I'm thinking now with the Islanders. But now on to the Washington Capitals. I'll put them in conservative buyers. I feel like it makes a lot more sense for them to be there than the Islanders. Washington currently holds the first wildcard spot with 58 points in 52 games. I think they're going to make the playoffs. They were able to stay afloat, until they got guys like Nicholas Backstrom and Tom Wilson back, although Tom Wilson's already out again. But their GM's already came out and said that as long as Ovechkin's on the roster, he's going to try to contend. So we know they're not selling. They're going to be buying. And now for the final team of today's video, we have the Winnipeg Jets. I'm going to throw them up there in the buyers category. They're having an unbelievable season. They're tied with Seattle for second place in the West, neck and neck with Dallas for first place in the Central. I think the Winnipeg Jets are legit. They obviously have a ton of star power up front. Defensively, that's where the biggest improvement has been this season under Rick Bowness. I feel like the Jets have proven to the front office that this team is definitely worth, investing some more into and trading away some future assets, because I don't think they're all that far away from being a legit Stanley Cup contender, especially with Hellebuck playing like he is this season. So that is going to wrap up today's video of my rankings for every NHL team and kind of their position heading into the trade deadline. And I honestly rambled a lot in this video, more than I expected to, so this was kind of like a preview for every team heading into the trade deadline if you think about it. Like I said at the beginning, always want to know your guys' thoughts, so if you disagree with any of my choices, let me know what you would change down below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all soon.